Hello, and welcome to today's Osteoporosis Support Group for June 2024. If you were with us a moment ago, you heard there was a technology snafu. So thank you all for coming today, our familiar friends and our new friends. All right, we'll be talking about exercise progressions and how we can progress ourselves safely. So when we talk about osteoporosis, we not only want to consider our numbers, but also our other factors that can play in. For example, our genetics, our family members, our family history, any outside risks that we may have, any medications that we're using. For example, our steroids or our thyroid medications, very necessary medications, but they do have an impact on our osteoporosis. And we also think about where in our own personal bodies the bone loss is. So we have our major fracture sites for osteoporosis. We have our wrist fractures, our hip fractures, and our vertebral fractures. So in the chat box, if you've had a fragility fracture, feel free to pop that in now. I can see that off to the side. It looks like maybe we have no fractures in this group. Excellent. Okay. So for our wrist fractures, that usually happens from a fall on an outstretched hand. Say you're tripping and then you reach forward, you try to brace yourself. That's where we frequently get our wrist fractures. To build strength for those, we use the upper body exercises as well as preventing falls, which is key. It'll be a theme throughout today. Build our lower extremity strength, our legs and our hips. And of course, check our environment, all the areas around us. When we talk about our hip fractures, those are also frequently from falls. And to deal with those, for our exercises, we want to build our leg and hip strength and impact exercises. And of course, we want to prevent falls for those and techniques that we can use to work on our balance, foot and leg strength, and again, checking our environment. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. For the vertebral fractures, those happen often silently. It's not always from a fall. It could be from bending over too far or lifting something with poor posture. Those we may not know that we have, but to prevent them, we build strength in our trunk, our upper body and lower body, anything that we think of as our core. There was a point where people were saying, your core is right here. But really, we like to think of our core as anything from here to here. Yeah, we've had a couple of people who've had some compression fractures. And it's absolutely possible to strengthen and stabilize those fractures with our exercise routines. Now, of course, we talk about these as our major fracture sites. You can really have a fracture anywhere, but when we look at the data, these are our hallmarks of osteoporosis fracture sites. Okay, so our comprehensive exercise program for bone health and fracture prevention, we want to include impact, resistance exercise, and of course, our balance exercise. Our impact, you get that from weight bearing, your walk, your jump, your stomp, and we'll vary our load and our speed. Our resistance exercise, that's what we think of as like our traditional strength exercise, and that provides additional load onto our bodies in all different sorts of directions to get the pull on our bones. And of course, for our balance, preventing falls is the key to preventing fractures. So you want to check your environment and get on and off the floor. So when we talk about our environment, that's the stuff that we have around in our house in our day-to-day. Any of your trip hazards. In my office, I have a Pilates chair that I think I have a permanent bruise on because I bump into that every day. So that's something that I'm working on finding a little bit better place. Your area rugs, things like grab bars in the shower. You don't want to wait until you need those grab bars to have them at the ready. Installing them now will know that you always have that security. Say you need to bend over and just grab onto something to hold on to. You'll have that safety measure already ahead for you. So let's talk about our types of exercise. Impact. So in the chat box, if you want to add in what type of impact exercises that you do, this is great to get ideas from our peers. Our guy in the picture, he's doing some box jumps. And in terms of walking, we know that walking is great for fracture prevention. It's great for our endurance. Depending on your training level, yeah, I see some running and jogging. That's great impact exercise. Depending on your training level, walking may be more of a maintenance than a builder. So we can supplement that by doing our stomping, our heel drops, hiking, any aerobic dancing, stair climbing, definitely that jogging. There's also jump roping. And to increase it, we can increase our speed, our distance, or for example, like in this video here, the height of our jumps. So now how hard would we work? This slide is for folks who like to work by the numbers. I do like to work by the numbers, but I also like to make it easy. So I cheat and I use my watch and it tells me all of the information for me. So if you like to have your set of numbers, you can run through these formulas once. Don't worry, this is not the only method. On the next slide, we'll talk about another way to measure it. So to calculate your heart rate, you can always measure your pulse first thing in the morning, 30 seconds, and multiply it by 2. So that's how you find your resting heart rate. And when you see this in the formula there, that's that RHR. I like to do this on a few consecutive days in a row. That way you have a more true score to yourself. So just do it a few days in a row, average out the scores, and then you'll have your resting heart rate. So we have our parameters. When we're talking moderate exercise, we want it to be like 50 to 70% of our max heart rate. And for vigorous exercise, it would be more that 75 to 85% of your heart rate. So for using our example here, we've got somebody who's 70 years old and they want to exercise between 50 to 85% of their heart rate. So we plugged in the numbers and then we come up with 113 to 142. So those would be your exercise windows. Now, very important, only exercise to a level you are able. If you're coming back from an injury, if you're just starting out after an illness or for the first time, getting up to that vigorous, it might be very different than when you're at when you feel like you're trained. So make sure to ease into things slowly and progressively. So for bone gains, we want that 85%, that vigorous amount, 20 to 30 minutes, 3 to 5 times per week. All right, so if you're more of a feeler, a perceiver, this is how you can go just based on the way you feel. We have the 0 to 10 scale, which is pretty easy for our brains to calculate. 0, rest. 10, the hardest you can imagine exercising. So for your vigorous, you're on that 6 to 9 level. In the clinic, we often use the Borg rate of perceived exertion. It uses 6 to 20, which sounds kind of random. However, research has shown that it correlates to your heart rate. So that 6 out of 20 would be that 60 or close to that resting heart rate. And that 20 would be that super, super high, like, oh my goodness, how did I even get here? So if we go for that vigorous, it would be somewhere around that. Maybe that for our previous person, it would be that like 140, maybe 150. 18 might be a little high for that previous example. And so again, in terms of what it might feel like to us, moderate, your breathing, you're going to be able to hear your breathing. You'll be able to talk with your friends if you're going for a walk, but you can't sing. For the vigorous activity, you'll definitely be able to hear your breath. You might be gasping. It might be really hard to breathe. You'll have single word answers. You can't really hold that conversation. If somebody asks you a question, it's just one word. Pizza. Usually the one word if I had to choose one. All right, so for this one, oops, we lost the top guy of this. So progression for impact. In the dialog box, how can you progress the impact? We talked about it a little bit a moment ago. If you can think of any ways to progress impact. So for our variables, we want to make sure to increase by no more than 10% per week. And to do that, we could do duration, speed and intensity, or frequency. We definitely don't want to progress all of the variables all the time, like the everything everywhere all at once is not a good look when you're trying to progress your exercises. It'll be just too much for your body. And our goal is to get stronger safely, right? We want to prevent those injuries. So we'll choose one of the variables. So if you're walking 20 minutes a day, maybe next week you walk 22 minutes a day. If you're increasing your speed or intensity, maybe you're walking the same distance, but you're walking faster, right? So maybe it takes less time. If you're jumping, maybe you're jumping higher. Or maybe you just want to add another day in through the week. All right, so let's move on to our resistance training. And again, if you want to put it in the chat box, what type of resistance exercise do you do? It's always good to get examples from our friends. Oh, we've got some weight training, yay! So for strength training, that's one of my favorites. For that, we can use bands, we can use free weights or barbells, and we can also use machines. So also, if you're still new, especially here in the clinic, we have a lot of people who are either coming back from a surgery. Yeah, bands and machines, great. Yeah. If so, starting with gyrotonic and Pilates, that's a really good place to start if you're coming back from injury, you're new to a training age, or if you're at the level in your Pilates where you know how to safely load that. If you're working with somebody who's trained in osteoporosis, what happens sometimes with gyrotonic and Pilates is we start using too little resistance. So for example, in the Pilates class that I teach on Wednesdays, we do Pilates, but we add our weights in there too. All right, so for resistance, how hard do we want to work? We want to work into that 65 to 75% if you're starting out. Ultimately, the research is showing now that 85%, if you can get to that 85% of your one repetition max, you'll be seeing a really good benefit to your bones. Now, one repetition max is exactly what it sounds like. It's how much you can lift exactly once, but you can't do it again. Now, we're definitely not saying that you want to train your one repetition max. You know, if you're a power lifter, great. That's your goal. That's what you're doing. You're training that one repetition max. I have only trained my one repetition max when I was training to be a personal trainer. That was part of what we did in order to see what it feels like, how to coach our clients through it. But for my body and my goals, I stick more in that 85% range. And when I'm progressing, maybe I'll go to that 10 to 12%. So let's take a look at that. So if we're doing 80% of our one rep max, that would be an 8-rep scheme, anywhere from 3 to 5 sets. We'll talk about adding volume. So our example weight, we'd have 10 pounds, 8 reps, 3 sets. Now, after usually for most folks about a month, that's going to start to feel like a little too easy. So then you bump it up. You're still doing that 10 pounds, but then you go into your 10 repetitions, your 12 repetitions. And you know that when you can get that 12 repetition, 3 sets, and you're like, I got this, that's when we add weight. So depending on the type of exercise, usually somewhere between 2 to 5 pounds increase is a good start. Of course, if you're only using 1 pound, increasing to 2 pounds can be a little hefty. So make sure to temper your own body. And when we increase the weight, we'll cut down those reps again. So now we'll have the 12 pounds, 8 reps, 3 sets. Okay, so frequently what I'll have my clients do as well, when they've had that base training and they're ready to progress, we'll do a warm-up set. Like I had one of my people today, it was very exciting. She used to use 2 15-pound kettlebells for her deadlifts. And when she first picked those up, she could not even believe that she could do one of those. Well, now the 15 pounds is her warm-up. So she does one set of 12 repetitions with 15 pounds. And then she did her work sets. We brought her up to 2 sets of 5 with 2 25-pound dumbbells in her hands. And then after that, we did one more set of the lighter weight just to cool her body down. And that's a way that she's been able to progress really nicely. All right. So going on to our balance exercises, do we have any favorite balance exercises that we do? Feel free to put those in the chat box. Oh, tree pose, that's a good one, definitely. Yeah, yoga is wonderful. Tai Chi in the literature is always the gold standard. You'll see the most studies on Tai Chi. You'll see some on Pilates. We know gyrotonic exercise also benefits it. Yeah, there we go. We've got some Tai Chi aficionados. When you're working with gyrotonic, when you're working with Pilates and osteoporosis, make sure it's somebody who's trained in those methodologies, because in all of them, there is a lot of flexion, that forward bending, and that's something that we want to avoid with osteoporosis. And again, we definitely want to check our environment when we're doing our balance exercises. If you think about like a crowded street versus a quiet street, if you're doing your balance exercises in a quiet room, say you do the toothbrushing technique, you're doing your single leg balance, toothbrushing technique, you're perfect in your bathroom, but then you get to a busy yoga class and you try your tree pose, you're like, wait a second, I can only do this for maybe 5 seconds. So that's one aspect of environment. We call it closed environment when you're all by yourself, or an open environment when you're out in the world. And of course, you want to make sure that you know that you can grab onto something safely, or you can put your other foot down when you're testing your balance. Our primary goal is safety. Okay. So progressing balance. How can we progress our balance? If you have any favorite tips, feel free to add them in the box. And it can depend on your goals, right? So we can work from our sensory system. If you're somebody who has maybe diabetic neuropathy, if you don't feel your hands and your feet really well, you may want to work on your sensory system a little bit more. So that would be going from your hard floor to your squishy floor. If you're working on your visual system, you would go eyes open to eyes closed. And it seems a little arbitrary to work your balance with your eyes closed, but I promise it's not. It's our intention for it to transfer to things that are like, you wake up in the middle of the night, you have to go to the bathroom. Like, okay, we want to be able to find our balance. Or if you imagine that busy street, you're walking down the streets, not only is it a crowded street, somebody may bump into you, but now it's night out. So it's harder to see those potholes or those cobblestones on the road. So practicing with your eyes closed will help your body develop those ways to deal with that. And vestibular, that's our inner ear. We often think of that for folks who have stuff like vertigo, but I definitely practice this with all of my people, because we think about head nods and head turns that not only that challenges your vestibular system, but it can be super practical in the real world as well. So our head turns side to side, we have to do this when we're crossing the street. Our head nods up and down. We talk about look at the stoplight, look at the sidewalk. So you have to check both ways when you're interacting out in the world. And of course, multitasking. We can do ball toss, talking, which we frequently do when we're with our friends anyway. Arms and legs moving, you can carry something, all different ways to progress. And you can see in the top corner there, it says, if you are good at it, it's too easy, and this is too true. If you can do that tree pose for a minute and you're like, I've got this, yes, absolutely celebrate that. You earned it, and it's too easy. If you're doing your exercises for 30 seconds for a minute, it's time to make that exercise a little bit harder. Our neurological system, our muscular system, it all benefits from progressive overload. So we want those adjustments, those wobbles. That's our body learning new information to take along with us. All right, so our other concepts for progression, there are snacks, exercise snacks. This is a new topic that is becoming more and more popular. So if you're somebody who is their Zen place, and you know that, yes, maybe you've been walking for a long time, but this is your favorite route, you don't want to change it up, you don't want to add in hills, maybe you add some more impact throughout your day. So you could do skipping through the parking lot, you could do heel drops at the bus stop, and our favorite balance when you're brushing your teeth. Or if you're somebody who does not like to do that huge chunk of exercise all at once, or maybe it doesn't work into your schedule, you can still get in some good exercise. And we talked about volume when we were talking about our resistance exercise. So we can add more load to increase the total duration of time that we're lifting or time that we're running or walking. We can do our squats, little squat snacks, 3 sets of 10 before each meal. Or maybe if you're working in the office, 10 when you get to the office, 10 when you get off a conference call, 10 before you leave for the day. I have one of my people, he works with me 2 times a week, and then he has his weights in his office, and he'll just do some little exercise snacks on the other day to round out his routine. Now, we've talked a lot about progression. I'm going to get on my soapbox. Rest is just as important as our exercise, right? So exercise puts us into what we call the catabolic state, where everything is breaking down, right? Breaking down is okay because that's how we build up. And when we build up, that's during that rest routine, that's getting that good sleep and getting our adequate nutrition to help repair our bodies, repair our bones, and keep us strong. Especially for our perimenopausal women, menopausal women, postmenopausal women, when we're progressing our exercises, we want to make sure that we're taking care of our tissues, right? Our bones are strong. We want to keep our bones strong. Our muscles are strong. We want to keep our muscles strong. Frequently in our age demographic, it's the connective tissue that can be sometimes slower to go along for the ride. So as you're progressing, make sure to listen to your body. If you're not sure, you can progress a little slower and progress a little more steadily, especially if you're somebody who's coming from an injury, you know you have a shoulder injury, let those other tissues attenuate with you. Okay, that's to say, some muscle soreness is okay, right? You don't have to have muscle soreness to have a good workout, but if you have muscle soreness, it's totally natural, right? We want it to be that good sore where maybe you stand up, you're like, oh, I think I did some squats yesterday. Or if you touch your muscles, you're like, oh yeah, that's a little tender. When we've gone overboard is if, for example, you try to get up out of the chair and you're really struggling, like you can't get out of the chair. Or normally you walk up the stairs without using the handrail, but you're so sore that you need to use the handrail and you can still barely get up the stairs. That is too sore. But a little sore, I feel it, but I can still do everything that I need to do, everything that I'm expected to do. That is totally okay. All right. So the best exercise with all of this information that I've thrown at you is one that you're going to do. So it doesn't matter what the ideal thing is if you're not going to do it. So make sure to find something that resonates best with you. So the snacks can add up, not only our nutritional snacks when we're helping to build our body, but also this thing called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which has been getting a lot of press in the metabolic world, has the best acronym, NEAT. And what that is the energy used daily outside of our formal exercise. So more like our exercise snacks. And those are our body posture, which is sitting versus lying down. So you'll have more non-activity exercise thermogenesis sitting up versus lying down, and standing up versus sitting. So if you feel like you need to get a little bit more time on your feet, more impact, then you'll choose those body postures. Same thing with ambulation. Ambulation is just walking. For walking, adding in any extra steps in the day can be beneficial. Back when I was working as a personal trainer, I had a person I was working with. He was 90 years old, and then I left the job. He didn't stop exercising. He kept exercising, and he said that somebody had passed on to him, make sure to make everything as inconvenient as possible. And so that's, parking the car as far away from your desired location as you can, taking the stairs whenever you can, maybe walking around the building before you get to your doctor's appointment or walking around the building before you get to work, and taking all of those opportunities that you can to get a little bit more time on your feet. The last component of that one would be spontaneous movements, including fidgeting. You'll see here that for me, sitting still is so difficult. So, and some of you may be in that position as well. So there is some fidgeting that's involuntary. Sometimes you'll see the kids with their fidget spinners or like they can't stop moving their hands. But you can also add in your day just by changing position. We know for our posture, it is good to vary up our position. We don't always want to sit with perfect posture, and we don't always want to slump. So finding different safe ways that you can sit can also be beneficial in terms of this NEAT, this activity thermogenesis. And again, this is associated with the metabolic diseases, prevention of diabetes and things such as that. And it's also associated with improved longevity, not only the length of time, but the quality of life. And that's something that we want for all of you. And then the last thing is our study, a 2017 study. Now, this was a cross-sectional study, so they were not 100% sure whether it was correlation or causation in the study world, or is it people that did this exercise had better bones, or did people have better bones because they did this exercise? But the parameter was 1 to 2 minutes. So 1 to 2 minutes of a brief burst of high intensity weight-bearing exercise, people had 4% better bone health in 1 to 2 minutes. Now, after 2 minutes, there was 6% better bone health. So it did still continue. How we can incorporate this into our regular routine, if you're not somebody who likes to run or jog, or maybe that's just not in your body, it doesn't work for you, you can add the walk and then the walk with the 1 minute, oh my goodness, I'm so late pace. So walking as fast as you can, getting up to that that single word vigorous exercise. So our take-home message is, in order to build bone, you have to do more than your bones are already used to, and without injury. We can increase the load and intensity to challenge the tissues, but not to failure, right? You want to be able to stay safe the whole time. All right, so if we want to hop into the dialog box, we can fill out this exercise over the week chart. This is one way to look at it in terms of those concrete terms. We've got resistance, impact, and balance over the days of the week. So what do we want to do on Monday? So Monday for me, technically, that's my big rest day because all of my other days I have other things. So I can tell you what my schedule is. So Tuesday for me is one of my impact days. I go running on Tuesdays, and I also do a little bit of yoga. For me, I do full body routines, so I do that twice a week. So I do my resistance training on Wednesday, upper and lower. There are go wrong no matter what you choose. It's whatever works best for you. Thursday is either an impact day for me or a rest day, depending. And then Friday, it's kind of a combination. That's either my other impact day, and then I also go climbing, which I consider one of my strength days. Saturday, and then Sunday is another one of my strength days. Yep, Saturday would be another impact day. So that's just one example of how you can split up your routines. Okay, so we always like to mention this, especially if we have any of our new friends here, exercises to avoid with osteoporosis. We don't want to be doing any of those, the crunches, sit-ups, forward fold, anything like that. Those are off the menu. There's plenty of good exercises to work that core without rounding our spines. Anything that's loaded spine flexion, like yoga plow, Pilates rollover. If you're picking up something with a rounded spine, that would also fall under that category. Any of those deep twists, going end range with overpressure. I know those used to be really popular in yoga classes. Where you twist, we love our active rotation, but getting there and really cranking on it, that's not great for anybody, and definitely not for us with osteoporosis. And anything also that has direct hard pressure on the rib cage. So we love our exercises to promote spinal extension. That'll help with your posture. But for a lot of us, and like in my Pilates class, I say you can put a pillow under your belly, under your hip bones, wherever it feels most comfortable for you, so that you don't feel like you have a lot of pressure on that rib cage. Okay, so these are the exercises that we're going to practice together: our squat, our deadlift, our push-ups, some rows, plank, and some balance. We've got a big menu to attend to. So if you have any weights with you and you feel comfortable doing these exercises, you can join me. If you're watching along and you want to do them next time when you watch the recording, feel free to mark it along. I'm going to